Putin is going to take Latvia. Putin is going to take Estonia. Putin is going to move into Poland. Putin must be stopped. Putin is Hitler. Putin is evil. Putin is a dictator. Frankly, I liked it that Trump wouldn't kowtow to the people who were urging him, well, you called Zelensky a dictator. Would you call Putin a dictator? And he says, I'm not into name calling here. I'm into getting to yes. I'm into getting an agreement that gets the killing stopped. I'm dealing with Putin because he's the guy who's running Russia. I didn't say he was a nice guy. This is not about him being a nice guy. This is about the realities of global power.
Who is this man, Putin, who would kill over NATO being next door as if there was any chance of NATO bombing Russia or trying to harm Russia? Putin is a foreign, menacing figure. I don't see any sense of that in our president. There will be ways of holding Zelensky to account and telling him that there's a realpolitik that we need to acknowledge. But the way it would be is along the lines of, Volodymyr, I know this has all been horrible. What happened to you is a hideous thing. I understand how you must be feeling, but we're not going to put our money into this anymore because, as you clearly know, you can't win this. This no longer makes any sense.
The emotion did creep in. I mean, Vance says you disrespect by coming in here and litigating this in front of the press when we're just trying to save your country and we need to do diplomacy. And Zelensky says, what diplomacy? Putin doesn't abide by agreements, and he ticks off the agreements that Putin has not abided by. He promised prisoner exchange, and he didn't even do the prisoner exchange. And you want diplomacy? You want diplomacy? And Trump interrupts and he says, in effect, you're in no position to tell us what we want and what we don't want. You're toast without us, period. Full stop. Shut the fuck up. Behind closed doors, it would have been one thing. I think the fact that that kind of exchange took place in real time before rolling cameras in a room full of press attendants was extraordinary, and it was humiliating. It was a humiliation of the guy that didn't have a suit on. That would be John McWhorter over there. How you doing, John?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I am Glenn Loury. This is The Glenn Show. Every other week, John McWhorter and I talk about this and that, and we're talking this week. He is a professor at Columbia University and writes for the New York Times, and I am a professor at Brown University and host of The Glenn Show. So here we are, John. What's up, man? What's new?
Well, I guess because we're talking on the day after Trump and Vance yelled at Zelensky in the White House.
Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on this
position to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this.
what
I'm not
You're
dictating.
in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You
We're
will-
going to feel very
you will
good.
feel influenced.
We're going to feel very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the very
bad position,
beginning
and he
of the
happens
war.
to be right about
From
it.
the very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a
Brown,
good position.
I
You
was
don't have
in
the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
playing
But
cards.
right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
Yeah, you're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives of
anymore.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War
What you-
III.
what you
You're
thinking about?
gambling with
What you
World
thinking
War
about?
III. And
You-
what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
I'm
That's
with
back
all
to
respect to
you.
your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said
very
they
respect.
should.
I've been thinking about that. And there are intelligent people who have said that if you look at the whole interview, Zelensky had it coming, that he had not really been a very good diplomat in the conversation. But I think nothing pardons what happened during those last 10 minutes with the tone, with the recreational anger. And I must admit, I don't know if we should go here, but I found myself thinking once again, is it really a derangement to think that there is a special circumstance when that man is in office? And it was just one of a great many things that have happened over the past few weeks. But the way they treated him, like they were these, it reminded me of the way boys treat the weaker kid at camp. And no, that didn't happen to me, but it could have. And I watched it happen to others. And just why that behavior? It's so uncivil, so unfiltered, and so damned mean. Just
But you say
mean.
there's intelligent commentary that suggests that Zelensky was in the wrong and that he mishandled the association. What about that?
That's real. But he didn't do anything to deserve the way they spoke to him. Mean. And also, you wouldn't know that they're talking about a country full of human beings. It's inhuman the way they talk to him and about that particular subject. It's about a nation. I was appalled.
I must say I'm amused a little bit by this reaction. I heard on the NewsHour, David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart comment to similar effect. They were appalled. They were disgusted. Bad manners, what bad people Trump and Vance are. And I thought, okay, I see where they're coming from. Ukraine, poor defenseless country invaded by Russia. They're the victims here. They're our ally. We treat them with disdain. We don't show respect. And I thought, it does feel Trump derangement syndrome-esque to me. It feels like a personalization and a characterological account of something that's really geopolitical, and it has to do with the relationship between the United States and the European Union and NATO. And it has to do with the ending of this conflict and the perception, the narrative that one tells about this conflict. I mean, a lot of things happened there in that extraordinary encounter. I mean, it wasn't just the tone and attitude of the interlocutors. It was playing out on live television. It was Zelensky saying, this is what I heard. Everybody just take note. I am not an expert on foreign policy. I'm just a guy, okay? I'm listening, an intelligent, reasonably well-informed layman to what's going on. And this is what I heard. I heard Zelensky saying, we want to fight. We want to fight. We want to fight. We're the victims here and we want to fight. And I heard Trump saying, this is over. I'm here to negotiate a cessation of hostilities. This war is going on too long. When he said to Zelensky, you don't have any cards. I'm not talking about his tone. I'm not talking about whether or not he talked over him or whether his voice was too loud. I'm talking about what he was saying, the content of the argument.
Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait
answer?
a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
I know.
You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
Yes. What about West?
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me.
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you, you have to be thankful. You don't have the
I'm
cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
I can tell you
You're
again,
running low
I
on
know.
soldiers. Listen,
Don't
you're
please,
running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And
President.
then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
You don't have any cards here. You're being devoured. You're losing. We're your only shot. You come in here and you tell me you don't want a ceasefire, I want a ceasefire. This is what I heard. I could be wrong. I heard the Trump mantra being, end the conflict now. Those are my terms. That's what I insist upon. I'm the most powerful man in the world. I'm holding all the cards, and we're going to end this conflict. I'm going to negotiate an end to this conflict. I heard Zelensky saying, I'm in the right. I'm in the right. History's on my side. I thought you were my ally. This is unfair. And I heard Trump saying, did you hear when he said, Putin has suffered just like I have through the Russia bullshit? So anyway, let me not go on too long here. I saw the tectonic plates shifting. That's my go-to metaphor. I saw the structure of global political association and military commitment shifting. And I saw this horrific war come to an end. Trump says to Zelensky, you're playing without any cards and you're gambling World War III, you're gambling nuclear war, and we're not going there. I am going to come to an accommodation with Vladimir Putin. I don't care what kind of names you call him. And he was talking not just to Vladimir Zelensky, he was talking to the foreign policy and military establishment of the United States and of the European Union. And he's the most powerful man in the world. That's what I heard.
Glenn, I hear you. And I understand what you mean, that maybe we need to accept that Trump is bringing in a new world order and we change our sense of what's important, of how things are going to go, who wields power and how. I get that maybe we need to look at all of this with a certain amount of imagination. I doubt if we're going to come out of it feeling very good, but I understand this open mind, partly because it's probably healthier day to day, and partly because it exhibits more imagination than I think a lot of people have. There is a tribalism involved in despising Trump. It has become a mark of intelligence, and moral character among people I know. Yeah, you have to resist that sort of thing from whatever direction. But in this case, yeah, I agree with you. Ukraine can't win. I don't think that's a nervy thing to say. They can't win this. They would keep being funded. They would keep doing this for 25 years. There's no way to win this. However, the way to inform for Zelensky of this was not to yell at him in that summer camp kind of way. No, I was never traumatized, folks, by summer camp, but I remember that general tone. That yelling at him, literally raising their voices, Trump in that bent over position he uses in the chair, where what's going on is that a nation is a greater part of a nation is being destroyed, and Ukraine was invaded by Russia. This pretense that Ukraine was the invader and that Zelensky is a dictator, our president is tossing these things off, and then when asked in a press conference whether he said Zelensky was a dictator, pretends not to remember having said it. Glenn, this is a gorilla and a clown. And for him to be sitting in that office and yelling at this man who has been invaded and able to hold the very, very worst off, but is now facing Trump allowing Russia to take some of that territory, and Trump clearly admiring Putin because he's strong. Trump doesn't have a problem with what Putin did. Now, I understand that maybe we need to wear different glasses and just face that a large power might decide to eat up another one, and that's what happens between polities and human beings, and we need to stop being so namby-pamby and hope that that'll never happen again. That's going to take a lot for me. But if that's the way it's going to be, then we do get into a manner. People are dying, and Trump and Vance are in there yelling at Zelensky because they think of him as small and because he's not wearing a suit and because he is in a kind of denial. They have no compassion. Let's not say manners. They have no compassion. It's disgusting.
We trust the news to tell us what's happening in the world. But do we ever stop to ask who's behind the news? Who funds it? What agendas are at play? In a world overflowing with information, it's easy to get stuck in echo chambers without even realizing it. That's why it's more important than ever to have the right tools to cut through the noise, spot bias, and see the full picture. That's where Ground News comes in. It's the website and app I rely on daily to stay informed, to cut through the noise, and to get closer to the truth. Visit ground.news/Glenn Show to see how it works for yourself. My favorite feature of Ground News is the blind spot feed. It shows you stories that are disproportionately reported by either the left or the right. I find it really helpful for gaining a balanced perspective in our hyper-polarized world. And they surface roughly 20 of these stories every day. To show you what I mean, here's a story that's a blind spot for the left. It's reported mostly by right-wing outlets. EU spends more on Russian energy than Ukraine aid. And here's a story that's been reported by the left and ignored by the right. U.S. is destroying world order, Ukrainian ambassador warns. For both of these and for every story, Ground News gives you a breakdown of the sources covering it, the bias of the media outlets reporting across the left, center, and right, how reliable these sources have been in the past, and who owns them. This is the kind of news analysis you won't find anywhere else. Right now, my viewers can get 40% off the unlimited access Vantage plan, which is the same plan I use. Make sure you subscribe using my link at ground.news/Glenn Show. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code when signing up. That's ground.news/Glenn Show.
Do you remember the photographic images of people waving the Ukrainian flag on the floor of the United States House of Representatives?
I do. Mm-hmm.
I thought about that those years, that mood, that posture, when I saw the spectacle that you're appalled by yesterday. And I thought, what a sea change. And I asked myself, which would I rather have? Would I rather have my government waving the Ukrainian flag and fighting a proxy war against the nuclear-armed Russia over the issue of extending the influence of the North Atlantic Alliance, NATO, up to Russia's boundary, which they found unacceptable and went to war to prevent? Would I rather have that or the spectacle that I saw when the interest of my country, perhaps wrongly understood, perhaps rightly understood, but nevertheless, the interests of my country were being put first? Somebody was saying $300+ billion of armament have already gone down the drain. Somebody was saying, we're going to get quid pro quo for anything we do going forward. Somebody was saying, I'm going to put this thing to rest. I am not going to play with fire here in a constant confrontation with a nuclear armed state. And I was hearing somebody say, I'm not on your side. I'm not on his side. I'm on our side. And I thought to myself, I vastly prefer the latter. I vastly prefer vigorous, I almost want to say manly, defiant assertion of my country's interests as they are understood by the asserter, who is the most powerful man endorsed by a democratic process to lead this country, than faddish sycophancy and a kind of subcontracting of my security to the narrative of, Putin is going to take Latvia, Putin is going to take Estonia, Putin is going to move into Poland, Putin must be stopped, Putin is Hitler, Putin is evil, Putin is a dictator. Frankly, I liked it that Trump wouldn't kowtow to the people who are urging him, well, you called Zelensky a dictator, would you call Putin a dictator? And he says, I'm not into name calling here. I'm into getting to yes. I'm into getting an agreement that keeps us from, that gets the killing stopped. I'm dealing with Putin because he's the guy who's running Russia. I didn't say he was a nice guy. This is not about him being a nice guy. This is about the realities of global power. And I'm accommodating them to the extent that I am because I have the interest of my country at heart. Something like that. Now, a lot of people get mad at me. They're going to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. They're going to say I'm the sycophant, intoxicated with the aura of power that surrounds this imbecile, this idiot, this venal man, this child. And I'm thinking, first of all, he's the leader of my country. My country. I'm on the side of my country, not the global elites, not the World Economic Forum. I'm on the side of my country.
You would be a good president, but you're cleaning up the way Trump is actually dealing with this. You're kind of guessing how he might really feel. But I think really what you're doing is you are making a coherent case for telling Ukraine it's time to stop this, despite the injustice of what happened to you. I completely understand that. But there's more going on here. And it's not just an issue of manner, not just, well, nobody's ever yelled in that room before, but maybe we're in different times. Maybe it's part of the new informality, although that goes back to the 60s. But what moves me is that Trump and Vance were so contemptuous of the man. Why the contempt? Why do they hate him? And frankly, Trump hates Zelensky because Zelensky wouldn't cooperate in going after Biden in the quote unquote perfect phone call. In other words, Trump hates Zelensky because it's all about him. It's the usual. Why do they hate him? There's this country. It's a nation, and it was invaded by a much larger one. And all Trump has to say is that you brought it on yourself. You invaded them. You, Zelensky, are a dictator. And all of that yelling came from the two of them not liking him. What did he do to not be liked? Okay, he was a little...
I mean, just as a side point, I don't think Trump ever said that Ukraine invaded Russia. I think what he said was
brought it on themselves.
This war never needed to happen. And I think that has to do with, and it's not accurate. It's not, I mean, what he said is not accurate that they brought it on themselves because we foisted it on them. I mean, it's in a way, it's kind of like exactly the opposite. My understanding is when Zelensky first assumed power, he was looking for a way of accommodating Russia and coming to some kind of an agreement. And we discouraged that out of this ambition to expand the influence of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization up to Russia's border. This is a complicated subject. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on it. But this war didn't need to happen. I mean, I'm following the likes of the Jeffrey Sachses of the world and the John Mearsheimers of the world and whatnot, who said in realpolitik language, Russia's a power. Russia needs to be accommodated in its sphere of influence, just as we are accommodated in our sphere of influence. And contravening that was rolling the dice, and it came up snake eyes. We lost. War is ensuing, a proxy war between the United States and Russia that we're prepared to fight to the last Ukrainian. And it's a world historic disaster, without any question, especially for Ukraine. But it didn't need to happen. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I thought was being communicated when Trump clumsily said what people are now interpreting as him attributing the start of the war to Ukraine, which of course is not true. But I mean, the main point here is I want an accommodation with Russia that brings this conflict to an end. And yes, it may entail some loss of Ukrainian territory, although there's negotiation and we need to talk about that. Crimea is never going back to Ukrainian sovereignty. You're going to have to blow up Moscow and Leningrad, Petrograd, St. Petersburg, and whatnot in order to accomplish that.
That yelling, though, was an indication of a position about all of this, which I see no sense of morals in. And so everything that you're saying is correct, but was that worth blowing up buildings in Kyiv and Mariupol and thousands and thousands of people dying and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, I forget what the figure is, of people permanently displaced, Ukrainians pouring over the border into Poland and having to make a new life?
I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm certainly not endorsing the awful destruction that was wrought by Russia on the Ukrainians. No, I am not.
Yeah, that it didn't have to happen, sure, but who is this man, Putin, who would kill over NATO being next door as if there was any chance of NATO bombing Russia or trying to harm Russia? I mean, frankly, it's foreign. Putin is a foreign, menacing figure. I don't see any sense of that in our president. There will be ways of holding Zelensky to account and telling him that there's a realpolitik that we need to acknowledge. But the way it would be is along the lines of, Volodymyr, I know this has all been horrible. What happened to you is a hideous thing. I understand how you must be feeling. But we're not going to put our money into this anymore because, as you clearly know, you can't win this. This no longer makes any sense. We'll try to preserve as much of your territory as possible. You need to give up on Crimea, but you didn't seem to care all that much about that anyway. But the rest that you've lost, we will do our best, but this is over. It's been long enough. But the idea being that what happened
That's
to you
what was
was
said.
a horror. None of it. Instead, they towel snap him in the locker room.
Yeah, okay. I mean, and I think that's what was said. I thought that was the message. But you're right, emotion did creep in a sense of affront. I mean, Vance says you disrespect by coming in here and litigating this in front of the press when we're just trying to save your country and we need to do diplomacy. And Zelensky says, what diplomacy? Putin doesn't abide by agreements, and he ticks off the agreements that Putin has not abided by. He promised prisoner exchange, and he didn't even do the prisoner exchange. And you want diplomacy? You want diplomacy? And Trump interrupts, and he says, in effect, you're in no position to tell us what we want and what we don't want. You're toast without us, period. Full stop. Shut the fuck up. This is what I heard in so many words. And, you know, behind closed doors, it would have been presumably just rough and tumble of what happens when a client state appeals to its patron and the patron says no, which is what was happening. The client state wants security guarantees after any kind of cessation of hostilities, and the U.S. is unwilling to say. They want to say that's Europe's responsibility. This is what Trump was saying. We'll put our companies on the ground to develop your resources and to make billions of dollars, and our people are going to be there, and they're not going to run roughshod the Russians over our people. That would be an act of war against us. So to that extent, we got security guarantee, but we ain't putting any troops on the ground, a peacekeeper or whatever like that. Let the Europeans take care of that kind of thing. And Zelensky says, no ceasefire, and Trump takes it from that. What are you telling me, no ceasefire? You don't get to dictate any terms here. This kind of thing. Behind closed doors, it would have been one thing. I think the fact that that kind of exchange took place in real time before rolling cameras in a room full of press attendants was extraordinary, and it was humiliating. It was a humiliation of the guy that didn't have a suit on.
That's just it. The fact that what was behind that was the sentiment of shut the fuck up. Regardless of how it was expressed, you could have said it quietly, you could have yelled. Of course, he chose to yell. But shut the fuck up is a deeply unfeeling, ignorant, and reprehensible feeling to have about what Zelensky is going through and the things that he was saying. Okay, it wasn't very diplomatic of him to start going into things such as that Putin doesn't keep his promises, or there'd be a way of saying it, such as, President Trump, Vice President Vance. I understand that this is difficult. I understand that these are not issues that you've had to face, but can't we think about the fact that Putin can't be trusted with a ceasefire? We've been through this. He could have done that. But for the feeling there to be shut the fuck up rather than how are we going to work at this, for it ever to get to the point where somebody who's supposed to be Franklin D. Roosevelt or John F. Kennedy or Barack Obama is basically saying, shut the fuck up. You have no power here. You have no cards. It's the way Robert Moses used to treat people here in New York. It's barbaric behavior. It's a barbaric sentiment, however you express it.
But I don't want to dwell on that. I mean, I don't even want to argue the point. I'll concede the point. I'll concede the point that it was unbecoming. I'm thinking two things. I'm thinking when Tucker Carlson interviewed Viktor Orban, Viktor Orban of Hungary, and asked him about the Ukraine conflict, Orban said, what you might have wanted our president and vice president to say, the first words out of his mouth was, the Ukrainians have fought valiantly and they've suffered horribly. And I'm not going to make light of that. It was a kind of reverent honoring of the awful catastrophe of death and destruction that has been wrought there. And the fact that these people have stood in the gap for 3 years now, notwithstanding the horrific losses that they've suffered, and that needs to be recognized. So even Viktor Orban who is next door and who understands that two Slavic nations are in conflict with one another and a slaughter has ensued, spoke in a kind of reverent tone. And, you might have thought you could have heard some of that in the Oval Office the other day. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to mention, which is not related.
Yeah. They don't feel.
The other thing I want to mention, which is not related, is I read Matt Taibbi and Walter Kern. They have a podcast, America This Week. They put out every week. They talk for a couple of hours. And I read the transcript of their post yesterday meeting post. And I commend it to your attention and to the audience's attention. I'm not going to try to summarize except to say a deep game, in their view, is being played here between the United States and the European Union that has many layers to it. I mean, there are tariff threats in the wind. There's, Vance's speech in Munich in which he's talking about the free speech and infringements of the European states. There's a sense that the U.S. has been, since the fall of the Soviet Union, that was what NATO was primarily constituted to resist. And that threat has significantly diminished with the demise of the Soviet Union. The U.S. has been extending a security umbrella and not getting benefit for it. And, I could go into details, but it would take us far. I just want to say there's a lot going on here in terms of geopolitics. I want to underscore that when asked in that press conference in the Oval Office yesterday whether the United States stood by its security obligations under the North Atlantic Treaty to come to the aid of Latvia or Estonia or Lithuania or Poland, should the case may be, Trump said yes. I mean, he said it reluctantly and grudgingly, but he said yes.
Glenn, is there a part of you that kind of enjoys the strongman aspect of all this? Maybe not.
I wouldn't say, because that's a little bit too fascist friendly, isn't it? I want a Mussolini. I want a muscular. But there's a part of me that likes the America First assertion. This was the theme of Taibbi and Kern. America has an imperial role and a national role. The imperial role is to hold the world together, whether it's East Asia, China, Taiwan, or the Middle East, or Europe, Russia, the threat of Russia, and whatnot. And we got to preside over the compact that allows global commerce to proceed productively and keeps the peace in every corner of the planet. And we're the indispensable nation. And there's the national role. And the national role is Palestine, Ohio. It's steel mills closed. It's unemployed people. It's, America not being, at the front line anymore of so many aspects of human striving and whatnot, that we're becoming, our airports suck. Have you been to, the Chinese cities that spring up overnight? 20 years later, you've got a megalopolis of 10 million people and everything is running. All the trains run on time and they got high-speed rail and everything. And we got Penn Station before the Moynihan Hall came online. Kind of thing.
Airports and the airports are 400 miles from the city and hard to get to. Yeah.
So the idea that somebody is in charge who wants to make America great again, and I understand that term comes with a lot of baggage, but who is serious about putting America first, and I understand that carries a lot of, isolationism tone to it. Yeah, that does appeal to me. And God knows, World War III, I don't want to get anywhere near that. I agree with Jeff Sachs, who says over and over again, the president basically has only one job: to keep that shit from happening. To make sure that we don't have the intercontinental ballistic missiles crossing paths with one another over the Arctic Circle as they inflict their civilization-ending consequences. And Trump is right to say that this situation runs that risk. Yes, a risk of zero is not what you want to do because that means you surrender to the guy who's the biggest bully. But you don't want to run that risk. Not gratuitously, not unnecessarily, not if you can avoid it, not if negotiation can forestall it.
I completely agree with that. The Ukraine situation is sad because Zelensky kind of reminds me of Eric Adams. He's just not going to give up. And in Zelensky's case, it's for the honor of the nation, not him, as opposed to Eric Adams. But yeah, he needed to be told. The idea that we would have, say, a Harris administration that continued giving him money, that continued getting weapons to him so that they could just keep this war of attrition up because that's nobler than facing that it's not going to end. I would have found that unfortunate. Yeah, that would have been ridiculous at this point when it's been 3 years. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I appreciate you meeting me halfway on this, John. And I'm going to meet you halfway and say, I cringed when J.D. Vance said to Zelensky, your country is being destroyed. And Zelensky had to say, like, I know that. It's like he doesn't know that his country is being destroyed. I mean, he's had to bury the dead, So anyway.
So that was what I was thinking this week as of yesterday. And what's been on your mind?
What has been on my mind? Well, I'm teaching my last class at Brown anyway. Maybe I'll renew my love of the relationship and the being the pedagogue in retirement. But I'm enjoying interaction with my students. We're talking about racial justice now, and we're going to be talking about affirmative action, the Supreme Court case, and about reparations. We're going to read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Atlantic piece. And yes, I'm afraid Coates' recanting of his citing of the German state's paying of reparations to Israel and his feelings about that he touched on in the notorious essay that you and I have discussed here will inevitably come up, and my Jewish students will be outspoken, and I hope not outraged, but we're going to go there to a little bit of to a certain extent. But anyway, I ramble. So there's a sense of heavy.
You realize that
sense of.
Are you ready for? That could be a really emotional class if you have Jewish students who might take deep offense. I must say that when it comes to teaching, I feel like I can handle any subject but that one. That's the one where I worry. And I worry because I've had it happen that things will get out of control. Yeah, it's hard.
Well, I have Black students, and I am going to be forced to recount my argument in a number of places about affirmative action. The City Journal published an essay of mine called Affirmative Distraction. And in the essay, I speculate about what it means to institutionalize using different standards of academic achievement to judge the admissions contest for Black students. Lowered scores, less distinguished academic record, and they still get admitted. And the point that I make is if you do that systematically, you guarantee that on the average, the post-admission populations will differ in how they perform in the college environment. If the SAT scores and the grades and the advanced placement courses and the whatnot are being used to vet white students or Asian students, and ones with higher scores do better, then predictably, if you take a group of people, Black and Latino applicants, and you use a lower standard for admitting them, the ones with the lower scores do less well on average, as a statistical matter. Otherwise, you shouldn't be using the test scores in the first place to vet the applications. And, I'm going to have to look that Black student in the face, and the student is going to be saying to me, are you saying I don't belong here? And I have a answer, which is I didn't say that. I said on average. Now, maybe you're not at the average. Maybe you're above the average, but everybody can't be above the average.
But that person is
This is just the hard reality of the statistical thing. This is not me having an opinion about you. This is just, I'm just, tell me where I made a mistake, but everybody can't be above average.
Yeah, that people have a hard time with that.
Now, my question is, before you go on, is that harder, looking at Black student in the face and making that argument, than looking a Jewish student in the face and making an argument that they might find to be uncomfortable about, in the case at hand, whether the reparations argument, Germany paying the Israeli state reparations, is comparable in any way to the domestic argument here in the United States of the U.S. paying the survivors of slavery and Jim Crow, the descendants, reparations. Coates disavows that analogy which he embraced in the original article. He now disavows it. That's a hard one to even get on the table in the present context of post-October 7th, 2023. But they're both hard. Everybody's got to suck it up a little bit and learn how to deal with uncomfortable arguments if we're going to get the best out of a class like the class I'm teaching, I would imagine.
Yeah, and if I really think about it, it's been rare that I've had to talk about racial preferences with undergraduates in a classroom. And I can think of the one time it did come up in one class I was doing. And a very sunny, naive California white kid asked, having no idea what he was stepping into, why do middle-class Black students need affirmative action? Why do there need to be racial preferences when somebody has grown up just like I did? Which is, of course, the question that everybody has, but most people know that you're just not supposed to ask it. And the Black woman in the class, is she the only one? Yeah. The Black woman in the class was one of the smartest and one of the most outspoken in the class. She's kind of a baby Michelle Obama, like even somewhat in appearance. And she wasn't having it. She was appalled that the question had even been asked. I don't think, as brilliant as she was, that she was aware that there was a discussion to be had about that to her, he had just basically slurred Black people. He might as well have said the N-word. And not long after that, she came to my office and said that she felt like the class wasn't a safe space. That was the first time I heard that term used. And this was right at the beginning of what we now think of as the Great Awakening. So that happened. And I imagine that could have gone much worse if maybe there had been more Black students, or if there had been a white student who pushed on it a little bit harder. Yeah, that would have been as tough as Palestine. That is true. Yeah, the one time I can remember.
Maybe a final thing. Joy Reid, rest in peace.
What I don't quite get. Well, for one thing, people saying she's a bad person, I think, are being really mean-spirited. I mean, she's hard left and she doesn't pull punches and she's kind of preachy, but that doesn't make her a bad person. Rachel Maddow is preachy too.
A lot preachier, if you ask me, that is Maddow compared to Reid.
I don't know. Frankly, Reid is a very nice person. I was on with her once, and it was when my children were much smaller, and I brought Dolly and Nessa with me to the studio. And Joy was very nice to them and even brought them on at the end. We were kind of waving, over the credits. And, Vanessa, she's holding Vanessa, little Vanessa at the time. So I don't think she's a bad person. Now, the idea that her dismissal is racist because she's Black, I haven't heard the case. If her ratings were really not high enough for the new plan, well, you don't keep her on because she's Black. Or I highly suspect that they're already doing that with another Black person, which is your favorite person, Al Sharpton. He still has a show. I don't know anybody.
By the way, audience, he was being facetious when he said he is not my favorite person.
And I don't know anybody who watches it. And I know that sounds like lefties who said, I don't know anybody who voted for GW. I mean, I'll bet there are people in Harlem, for example, who still love their Reverend Al, but I don't know anybody. And yet it's still on, and I think it's because there's a sense that you're supposed to keep him on for ceremonial reasons, but maybe the ratings weren't high enough.
But what is he, a weekend show once a week
I
as
honestly
opposed to
don't
every
know. I'm
night?
assuming a weekend. I don't watch it.
I think
Nobody
it
talks
is.
about it. But I thought Jonathan Capehart had been put on the weekend. Like I've been seeing him in like these Brady Bunch squares of all the people of color who've been dismissed from MSNBC. I thought he had just been shuffled, but maybe I missed something. Jonathan Capehart is a black commentator. But I don't know. I'd have to see whether it was about ratings. You can't keep a black person on just because they're black, although I think a lot of people think that's the way it's supposed to be. Melissa Harris Perry wanted the show to be too much about black people. That was considered racist, that she was eased out of her own show. But I don't know if that was a racist decision. If it was made...
Now, she got canned during a campaign when she got into a back and forth with management about how much of her show could be taken over by campaign-related stuff as opposed to the stuff that she wanted to focus on.
Yeah. I just have to see more evidence. Joy Reid,
I grant you some of the dancing on her professional grave that I've seen from the right. This is Joy Reid.
Mm-hmm.
They're calling her a DEI monger, and she's, I mean, you can, I think, criticize some of the things that she said from the podium there at her show.
She sees
but
racism
some of it
behind
is
every
just
rock and tree. Yeah.
It's just mean. It's like, if Sean Hannity were to get canned, or when Tucker did get canned by Fox, there was a lot of dancing on his grave from the left, but he's risen from the ashes, and I don't predict that for Joy Reid.
There's one thing.
I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't see
fine. I mean, there's such a vast ecology of places where she can make her views heard these days. Maybe it won't be the same as having her own show on MSNBC, but there was one thing about her that I always found disturbing. And it was that she did some clearly homophobic blog posts in the rather recent past. We're talking about the late aughts. So it's not like it was in 1974. And they were by her. And when these first were brought to attention.
Gay sex is disgusting, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And very making fun of gay people in the way that many people unfortunately do. And at first she claimed that it wasn't her, that she'd been hacked, that somebody...
She'd been hacked.
Yeah. And that was transparently not true. And in fact, that was disproven. And then, she said, well, there were some things I said in the past I've learned since then, as if these were things she wrote in college in 1990 or something. But no, it was Joy Reid as she is now. And nothing happened to her. And the reason that nothing happened to her is because she's black. I think that if a white equivalent person had been discovered to have rather recently written such things, they would have been at MSNBC pulled off of the air. They kept her. So that's another indication that it's not just racism that is getting her pulled away now. Because the fact that didn't stick to her, I think, was because of a sense that it's different if it's a black person. There's a sense that you keep that person on regardless. I found that a little condescending. I don't know if I really felt that she needed to lose her job because of those posts, but I knew that her white equivalent would have. And therefore, why not her? Why are we such children? But,
All right. Well, John, I suggest we call it a day and reconvene tomorrow to carry on with the Q&A.
And we shall.
Thanks a lot. Good talking to you.
You too, Glenn.